We are on Daf Samachay Amid Aleph, the middle of the Amid by the two dots. So going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said, Sachar lasas imem malach achar. It's about 10 lines up in the narrow lines. We said that you're not allowed to, a Yid is not allowed to work where he's going to, as a laborer with Yayin Nesach, with Avoda Zara. But we say if he hired him for a different piece of work, and together with that, he helped out with his Yayin Nesach, or he helped him with his Avoda Zara, or his client, we didn't say client, then it's mutter. Sagt Gemara, v'afa gavdali amalei to say arav. Mashmais of the Mishnah is, as long as he was hired for some other piece of work, that means he said, I'm hiring you to work in my field, and then he said, by the way, can you please go pick up my barrels of Yayin Nesach? It's still going to be mutter. Even though he didn't say, at the end of the day, by the way, I'd also like you to pick up this barrel of wine. Now, if he just asked him to pick up a barrel of wine without pay, there's no problem. The whole issue is getting paid for working with Yayin Nesach. So it certainly would be mutter for someone at the end of a workday to ask his laborer to, as a favor, do me a favor and pick up the barrel of wine. So he's not a paid laborer, it's not a problem. But the Gemara is saying that it's mashma from the Mishnah, that it's talking about even though he hadn't specified this after the workday. It was part of the workday, even so it's mutter. For the Gemara of Ramini, we're on Samachay Amid Aleph, about 8 lines up in the narrow lines. Ramini has Saychar Sapayr, someone who hired a worker. If someone hired a worker to work for him for the day, and as nightfall came, when the day of work was done, he said, pick up a barrel of wine of Yayin Nesach, then the pay that the worker received is mutter because it has nothing to do with this Yayin Nesach. He was paid for the day. This was for after the workday. Time damali to say erev. In Kuliyom Aloy, it's mashma from that brisa. Only because he was asked to work, and the pay was not associated with the work. But it's mashma that if he had to do the work during the day, if he had to pick up the yayin as part of his work that he was getting paid for, then his schar would be also. He says, no, our mission is taka talking about a case of Tusei Erev, even though it didn't say it, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about where he did it after nightfall. And Einachanami, if a guy asked a Yid as part of his job to carry a barrel of wine, it would be awesome. We actually had this whole question. All this came up. My wife had to make a party for her people at work, and the catering at her job, they usually handle it. They provided yayin that's not mavoshel, so it's stam yenam. So this is yayin nesach, which might be a little different, but it's stam yenam, and they're going to pick it up, and it's going to become aser. There are yid in there who are participating. So the question was if her facilitating this is aser, which is very similar to this question. So
where are we up to?
We're on Daf Samachay Amid Aleph, about 3 lines before the wide lines. So Abaya's teretz is Einachanami. Our Mishnah is talking about where the Jewish worker is being paid for the day, and then he's asked after his day is over to carry something. Rava Amalei Kasha. Hada Amalei heavily meya chavius b'meya prutas. Hada Amalei heavily chavis bepruta. That means it depends on whether the pay he was getting was to carry, I want you to carry 100 barrels for me today, and I'm going to pay you $100. But it wasn't saying I'm going to pay you $1 per barrel. And the other ones where he said, I'm going to pay you $1 per barrel. So against the way you'd think, the bigger problem is where he said, I'm going to pay you $100 for 100 barrels. And one of those barrels was a chavis of yayin nesach. Then all $100 is going to be aser because he's getting paid for the entire day, including this malacha of iser. So part of the schar is aser, so it all is aser because it's all it's one payment for the whole day's work. But if he broke it down, he said, I'm paying you piecemeal for each individual chavis, I'm paying you $1. So then, if he carried 99 bottles of heter and one of yayin nesach, the yid can get paid $99, and just that one chavis he doesn't get paid for. So our Mishnah, which is masan even not letusei Erev, it's going to be mutter. It's talking about where he said, I'm paying you a pruta for each one, for each individual, and therefore he can get paid the other 99. But Tanya, and we find a raya to this. Is this a raya? I think this is benichasa. Yeah, benichasa. Haseicher sapoyel. Someone who hired a work of Amalei heavily mei chavius b'mei prutas. If he said, I want you to take 100 barrels for 100 prutas, so he's paying for all of them at one time. It's found to be chavis of yayin nesach. Schar all the schar is aser because it's all lump sum. He's getting paid for all of them. Chavis pruta. If he says, I'm paying you one pruta for each chavis, and then he could get the schar of everything besides the one that was yayin nesach. There's no problem for him to get paid, which is exactly the way Rav had understood it. Zakt Gemara weiter. Haseicher, so the Mishnah had said, after we said the din of hiring a worker to work with yayin nesach, we said also someone who hired a wagon, a donkey driver, a donkey owner. He rented his chamar from him, and he had the yid rented out his chamar to a guy. So he said, Lavi alei yayin nesach schara yaser. If he hired the donkey, the guy hired the donkey to carry yayin nesach, the yid cannot take the rental fee for the chamar. And then we said in the same thing, but if he didn't, if it was one thing of yayin nesach amongst others, then it's mutter. Zak the Gemara hasu lamli hainu reisha. Why is it any different whether it was being paid as a salary or was being paid for rental? In either case, a yid is not allowed to benefit from working with the yayin nesach. So Gemara sefer tzrichalei sachal leishav aleh. If he hired a chamor, if he hired the donkey, I'm sorry, so if he hired the donkey to sit on it, meaning to use as a riding donkey, even though the Ovid Kechavim put his barrel or his bottle with the yayin nesach on the donkey, it's going to be mutter. So this is, even though the Gemara, the Mishnah didn't say this directly, it's coming to tell you this din, that if a guy would hire a donkey, when it says the case of where he hired it for something else and he also added in the bottle, it's talking about this case where he hired the donkey, the guy hired the donkey to ride on, and then he brought his bottle on it together with it. In that case, it's going to be mutter. So tomorrow, remember the login lav dinahu lo suve. So that would be mashma that the bottle of yayin nesach that the guy brings along with him is not part of the rental deal. That the guy was not entitled when he rents it to bring the bottle, because if it was, that was part of the rental. It should be also. Someone who rents a donkey. The renter is talking about two Jews. He rented a donkey. The renter has the right to put his clothing and his bottle with his yayin and his mzainis and his food for the entire trip. Even if it's a 1 week trip, he doesn't only have a right to put his burdens of whatever merchandise he's bringing, but he also has allowed to bring his personal needs on the donkey. The donkey driver can't say, you're overburdening my donkey, you're going to kill him. Mikan ve'elech chamar ma'akav alav. If he wants to do more than that, meaning he wants to take for the trip back, he wants to load the donkey with both the trip there and the trip back of the personal needs of the renter, then he could say, you're overburdening the donkey and I never rented it if you're that. Similarly, chamar, the donkey driver, can put he can put on it the sa'irim, the barley and the grain, and the mezainis for the donkey driver himself for each day. he's only entitled to put 1 day's worth of his necessities, because whatever he puts on is taken away from the room for the renter to put his merchandise on it. Become Elif Seichem Akalav. Any more than that, he can say, you're going to slow me down, you're putting on too much, overburdening it. Amar Abai. So, l'chayra, you see that a renter is entitled to put a bottle on it. If that's the case, why isn't that included? Why do we say that when the renter, who's a guy, puts his bottle on it, when he puts his bottle on it and he pays the yid, that it's not us. It's part of the rental deal. Even though the truth is that a renter is entitled to put a bottle on the donkey, he says it's not part of the money. That means it's a fringe benefit that you can put your bottle when you rent a chamar. But if he wouldn't put a bottle on it, he couldn't say, I want to get a deduction on the rental fee of the chamar because I'm not exercising, getting the full use out of it. This is just something on the side that you could do, but he's not getting paid for it. So therefore, the schar that the renter, the person, the owner of the chamar gets is not considered to be in return for his donkey carrying the bottle. So, what is this? Just looking more into this din that we just said, that the person who rents out the donkey can put on the mezainis and for himself and the fodder for the animal for one per day. What's the case? If they could find every day there's a store along the way, shouldn't the owner of the donkey be able to stop the person who's renting it from bringing along everything he needs for the whole way? Tell him, don't overload my donkey, just get each day at the end of the day. And if they can't find, how will the seicher, the person who's renting it, shouldn't be able to tell the owner of the donkey not to bring more than a day's worth? Should be able to bring the whole trip because he's not going to be able to replenish. We're talking about where it's possible to get, but you have to go off the interstate. You got to go into a town and make yourself a little meshuggah to find on the way. So a person who's in the business of rental, so he keeps things very efficient. He buys on the way. He makes the effort because he's in the middle of doing business. The seicher, who's the renter, he expects to get the white glove treatment. He's not going and expecting that he's going to have to put himself out to go find food. So that's the difference between what their expectations and what they're entitled to do on the way. Avua der Acha Breder Ravika. The father, or Ravacha, who was the son of Ravika, which, if you translate that into English, means Ravika, was, they talk about why is it called the father? Because it means because Ravacha was more chashiv than Ravika. So instead of just saying Ravika said it, they said the father of the Ravacha Ber Ravika, the famous Ravacha Ber Ravika, whose name obviously was Ika, have a shafich hu chamr lo'ev dekechavim. He had a business where he was like a middleman who would provide wine. He would sell wine to Ovdei Kechavim. So he gave wine, regular wine, and he would sell it to them. And the way he did it, Rashi explains, is he would take the wine, he was a middleman, he'd buy a barrel of wine, and he'd pour it into the personal wine flasks of the purchasers. And obviously these were purchasers of Goyim, they were Avdei Kechavim, and they had remnants of their Yayin Nesach in those bottles. So as soon as he poured it in, it would become Yayin Nesach as well. So he would sell to them and he would pour his wine in. And he would transport their full wine bottles, the wine flasks that the guy now owned, and he would facilitate him going across the river with it. And the way he got paid for the pain in the neck of helping this guy transport his wine back home, he would get to keep the original barrels that the wine came in. I don't think that was the full pay for the wine. That means that was his schar, his profit came from keeping the barrels and pouring into this guy's flask. Asur Amri Labai. They told Abaya this is what Ravika was doing. Amalei ki katarach b'atera katarach. He said it's not a problem. What are you worried about? You're saying that he's working, he's getting a benefit by he's getting the barrels in exchange for working with Yayin Nesach until it goes into the guy's thing. It's heter. As soon as it goes into the flask, it's awesome. But then he's no longer working for it. So he's only working with Yayin that's mutter. But the Gemara says, but still, as long as it's still in the flask, he has a vested interest that until the guy returns home, he's going to have to warranty if the flask that it's in breaks, he's going to have to pay it back. I guess the deal was not that it should belong to the guy until he comes home. So Zak the Gemara, the nitzteru ziki. The masni badai. We're talking about where he made a t'nai that if it breaks on the way, I'm not taking responsibility. So any of his work he's not benefiting at all from the INS. Inami demaisu pristiki badai. Or they had a backup bottle that they brought along, so even if it broke, he doesn't care if the yain nesach. If it breaks, because it's irrelevant, it'll still be backed up. We're not worried that two things are going to break. We're talking about Rav Ika was actually the person in charge of the river. So he was definitely involved. The Chayri would seem he's involved, that he's allowing them in return for getting the barrels, that he's allowing them to cross the river. So he's benefiting from the Yayin Nesach. The Katarach Bisur. So at that point, the work of getting them across the river, he's working for Yayin Nesach, with something that's Yayin Nesach. So we're talking about he didn't work. He already had arranged it. He had arranged in passage, but he himself was not involved, so there was no more work. Or another version of the same thing. Inami the Nakite Be Kitri, he gave him a simon, he gave them a string that was in a knot that the person, the ferryman would recognize, but he himself did not do any additional work once it became Yayin.
When did the wine actually become usher? At what point?
As soon as it goes into the guy's kli, there was a little bit of yayin nesach in it. It becomes mixed with that, and it becomes usher. As we're going to see, it's min b'minoi. Even a mashu is usher. But I don't know that doesn't mean it belonged to the guy at that point. At first, it sounds like it still belonged to him.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because when he would say that responsibility, when he would take it across, it was already usher.
It was already usher, but it didn't belong to the guy. Well, that's a different thing. The taking it across is that it's for the way the Brisa said from the story. It sounded like that he would carry them across himself on a boat.
Yeah,
and he's working in return for the barrels. That was part of what he's getting paid the barrels for. How could you get paid for working with Yayin Nesach?
So when it said ki katarach be'heter katarach,
that's on a separate thing. That's on the. That's
what I'm trying to figure out. Like, when does it go from the? Abaya said, "What is he? He's working with heter." Now all of a sudden it became usher as he's taking it across.
No. So what Abaya was saying is that was his point. That Rav Ika, as soon as he poured the wine in,
yeah,
at that point it was still mutter, and his job was over. He didn't have any other work to do. So then we said, but what about the problem of roitze b'kiyumai?
Right.
Even afterwards, he has some responsibility. So the Gemara says he had no responsibility for whatever reason, the different tourism. But he said, but Lamaisa, he still had another job to do. He had to ferry him across the river, and they're also getting paid.
But he's saying, but when he pours it in, it was beheter, right? It wasn't delivered to them yet. So at what point does it become?
It wasn't delivered to who?
To the guy.
It was. No, the guy is holding it.
Oh, you're saying he's holding it and it was already...
The guy's holding it and it goes to the guy, but he still had a couple of responsibilities. And one was to warranty if it breaks before it gets home. And
I thought when he was taking it across, right, that it was still not delivered yet. You're saying it was already...
No, it was delivered into the guy's hands.
And then he would drive them across. Got it.
Right. But then we have these specific questions. Zok the Mishnah. Yayin nesach shenafal al gabe anavim. if you have wine of yayin nesach, and it fell on a Jew's grapes, yadichem v'hem mutaris. It's very simple. You rinse them off and it's fine. A grape skin is non-permeable, so you just rinse it off and it's gone and you don't have a problem. But if the grape is split, asuris, then the yayin gets into the grapes and it's going to be also. The Gemara is going to talk about exactly what the case is. Was this nice and tam? Is it b'mashu? Is it nice and tam? Is it different timing? So there's two. I'll just give you the general outlook for the next block. You have to be aware. First of all, there's a rule of nice and tam what's the right order? First of all, something that is min b'minai has a different din of min b'she'ena minai. Min b'minai, when you have two things that are the same, they get mixed together, that's more chamerdik, it's also even b'mashu. But min b'she'ena minai, two separate things, they're different, they are also only with a nice and tam. So then, nice and tam, we use as a proxy for nice and tam, 1 out of 60. So when we talk about batal b'shishim, that's also another way, it's closely related or parallel to whether it's nice and tam. So something that's min b'minai, it's also even with a mashu. Something that's not min b'minai, it has to be a nice and tam or 1 in 60. Now, there's a separate question which the Gemara is going to address. It is what is considered to be min b'minai? What is two of the same type? And there's going to be a question of that, is that dependent on, do they have the same tam? Or does it depend on whether they have the same name? So we're talking about the tam in two different contexts. One is as far as the amount that you're going to be also with, if it's min b'she'enoi minai, it has to be a nice and tam in order to be aser. And also we're talking about tam, about whether it's considered to be min b'minai or not. If two things have the same tam, is it going to be min b'minai? Okay, this is all introductory, but this is not directly relevant yet. Nafal al gabi te'enim oy al gabi tamarim. If instead of falling on wine, on grapes, the yayin nesach fell on figs or on dates, so im yesh behem benois and tam aser. Those are things that are, first of all, they're not the same as yayin. They have certainly a different taste and a different name than yayin, so they're not min b'minai, the min b'she'ena minai, so therefore they need to be nice and tam. And it also, you can't be madiachet, you can't just rinse it off because it has nooks and crevices, so it absorbs it, or they have soft skins. So for whatever reason, they are permeable, and the yayin nesach gets into it, it can't be rinsed off. So if there's nice and tam, it's going to be awesome. Umaisa bebitis benzoinen, shehevi groigris besvina. He brought dried figs, which is going to be important in the Gemara. Not necessarily the same as the te'enim that we spoke about before. A barrel of wine of yayin nesach fell on these dried figs. And they said, anything that there's a hana with a nice and tam, it's not enough that to aser. As long if min b'she'ena mina, if it's a nice and tam, it has to be nice and tam with hana, which we call a nice and tam lifgam. If I'm saying that's not a nice and tam lifgam. It only is if there's a hana with the nice and tam that it's awesome. But if it's nice and tam lifgam, if the tam is deleterious, if it makes it worse, mutter, even though it gave a taste, so it's enough as far as the quantity. But since it's making it worse, that tam will not asa. Like vinegar that fell on top of beans, then it makes the grisen taste worse. You're not going to see, even if it's a nice and tam, it's going to be mut. So first of all, we alluded to Maisa Lister. First we said that nafal al gabi te'enim al gabi tamarim. If there's nice and tam, it's aser. And then we said the story of Bitis ben Zainin, that wine fell on his gregris, and we said it's mutter because it's nice and tam levgam. This is the correct way to read the Mishnah. Im nice and tam levgam, hu mutter. If it gives a tam, that's a pagam, it's mutter. So we forgot to give the introduction that was saying the exception. Maybe over there was mutter because groigers are different than regular te'enim. They're dried figs. Dried figs, it's taka nois and tam lefgam. Regular figs are helped with the taste of wine. Dry figs are made worse. Hahu kri dechiti. There was a pile of wheat. The nafal chavita de yain, and a barrel of wine fell in it of yain nesach. Shai Rava lizvuni lo avdei. Rava said it's mutter to sell to avdei gecham. You don't have a problem here. We're talking about the yain nesach over here. The yain nesach was it was enough to be a nice in town. It was not 60 times more of the wheat than the wine. That we're not talking about over here yain nesach mamish. We're talking about stam yenam. So it's mutter b'hana, but it's also b'shtir. So he's saying that you could sell it. You're selling it when you sell the wheat. You're just selling wheat. The wine in there is not part of the price. So you're not getting paid for the wine. And it's a guy. The guy is going to have the yain nesach, which is okay. He's allowed to have yain nesach. So Shai Rav Lizvuni Lev Deicham. Esvei
Rav. Is not a contradiction to what we just said?
How is it not a contradiction?
Oh, it is a contradiction.
No, it's not. So far, we don't have a contradiction.
It's a nice and tam lefgam or it's nice and tam la'ana. This one.
I don't know that. I don't think it was nice and tam lefgam. It was just a nice and tam. There's nothing, no indication that it was a pagam in this.
What?
It doesn't make a difference. You're selling it to a guy. Saying sell it to a guy. The guy is getting wheat, and he's not paying for the yayin nesach. He's only paying for the wheat.
But don't we say it's always together? Either it's Asr and it's Asr Bahana also?
No.
Depends if it's, that's what he said. It's not yayin nesach, it's stam yeno. Talking about the Mefarshim explained that it's talking about, the Rishonim explained, it's talking about stam yenim, not yayin nesach. It's not something that he actually was ovid, but just something the guy touched, so it gets the din of that it's also bahana, but it's also b'shtia, but muta bahana.
Oh.
And he's not actually, he's not really being nana from this wine in any case. I'm not really sure why it's a problem. You know, his hana is he's getting paid for the chitin, so he's not getting paid for the yayin nesach. I'm not exactly sure why it would be considered to be nana from the wine. If it gave a taste to the chita, it doesn't mean it's getting paid more for it. He's not getting paid for the chita. So what's his hana for the yayin nesach? I'm not sure why the Rishonim felt it necessary to say this, but they do say they agreed with you. They said it is hana, and therefore it's talking about stam yenim. Zak the Gemara. Esvei Rabbi Balivoy. They asked on the Rava, baggage avad by kalayim. So what is the problem with this? Baggage avad by kalayim. If someone has a baggage that has some kalayim in it, he has a woolen baggage, and there's one thread of linen that he can't find in it. If he could find it, he could just pluck it out. You can't sell it to a guy. What's the problem? A guy is not meshub, it's not mechuyev, it's not one of the Sheva Mitzvah. So we're going to explain. It's because we're chayshish that maybe the guy will sell it to you yid, and the yid is not going to realize there's shanas in it. He can't make it a covering for his chamor's back because we're worried that maybe he'll take a piece of it. If he needs to make a patch, the yid will take it and sell it. He won't. He'll use it for his own patch, and he'll be using klayim as clothing. But he could use this mixture with a little bit of klayim in it. He could use it to bury a mace mitzvah. There's no iser on a mace mitzvah. He's not being nana. There's no levishus klayim. And there's no chash that it's once something is used for a burial, it's also bana, So there's no chashash a yid will ever use it. So we said, we legabe this climb that was mixed in, we said you can't sell it to a guy because maybe you'll sell it to a yid. Hachanami. What about this case of the wheat that had wine poured on it? Wine of the Yayin Nesach. How can you sell it to a guy? Yisrael. Maybe this guy will turn around and sell the wheat to a yid, and it will have Yayin Nesach, which is also for a yid to drink. So Rava was masking. He said, you know what, you're right. Hadar shara lemetchinu lemefinu lezvinu. You can only sell it to a guy by if the yid first grinds it up and makes it into flour and bakes it, and then he could sell the bread to a guy. As long as it's not in front of a yid. Because why? What are you chayshish? He'll sell the bread to a yid. Pas of a guy is asur anyway, so a yid can't buy it from him. Now, the only thing you'll be chayshish is if a yid knows that it originally came from a yid, then he would buy from the guy because he knows it's not pas over kechavim. So that's what we say. You can only sell it to guy shaloi b'fnei Yisrael, that no one will see that it was originally pas Yisrael. So it'll be asur of pas Yisrael, so you don't have to worry that the yid will buy it with the yayin nesach in it. Tanan. Yayin nesach shenafal al gabe anovim yadicha. We said in the Mishnah, wine that fell on top of the grapes, you rinse it off. Vehem mutaris, they're mutar. Them hayim uvukayis, if they're split, asuras, then it's asa. So it's mashma uvukayis in she'em uvukayis la. It's mashma only because it absorbed the wine, then it's asur. But if not, it's mutar. So we're asking, why is Rava worried about the yayin that fell on the chitim? Why don't we say just rinse it off the same way we said in our Mishnah that you could rinse off by the grapes? Why don't you rinse off the wheat and get rid of the wine on it, and then it's perfectly kosher? Wheat is different than grapes. Grapes don't absorb anything, but wheat has a hole. When it dries out, it has a little bit of a split in it, so the yayin is able to go in through that split. Zok the Gemara. Chamra atika be'invi. When someone has old wine that mixed with grapes, divrei hakol b'noisen tam. Everyone will agree that the minimum amount for asuring the chamra atika, meaning the yayin nesach of old wine that fell onto grapes, that's going to have a noisen tam. This is definitely mimbish ein emine. Old wine is not the same thing as grapes. They don't taste the same, and they don't have the same. One is wine and one is grapes, and one tastes like wine and one tastes like grapes, or like old wine. But if you have new wine, which is essentially grape juice, it tastes like grapes, so then you have a machlekes. Abaya will say, since they taste the same, it's considered to be min b'minai, and therefore it's going to be asa b'mashu. Rava says, no, we don't look, and the Gemara is going to explain in a second, that Rava says we don't look at the taste to decide whether it's min b'minai. We look at the names, and one is grapes and one is wine, so they're two separate things. So it's still going to be, Rava is makel. He says you have to have a nice and tam in order to be us. Abai is machmer. He says even a mashu is us. Abai Amar, the Gemara explains. Abai Amar mashu basa time atzlin. You go basa the tam. Aidi chataimu. New wine and grapes have the same tam. The havale min b'minai or min b'minai b'mashu. It's min b'minai and a min b'minai is also in a mashu. Ravam b'nais and tam basa shma atzlina. He says Lagabi, whether two things are considered min b'minai depends on whether they have the same name. Vaishmalachot. One is grapes and one is grape juice. They're two separate things. One is wine or new wine or grape juice. So even though they taste the same, they're two separate things. You have to have a higher amount of iser in order to aser it. Tanan yayin nesach shenafal gabe anavim. Practic Gemara. We said in our Mishnah that if the wine in our Mishnah fell on top of grapes, and kasakudat the chamra chad tab envy, the Gemara l'chatchila assumes that our Mishnah is talking about new wine, and it fell on top of grapes. And my lab and noisen tam, and the Gemara further assumes, and that this the Gemara is going to have a basis for. They're going to prove from later on the Mishnah that we say it becomes aser when it's said in the Mishnah. It becomes aser that when it's also when it's cracked, it's only also when it's a nice and tam. So my lab a nice and tam, loy b'mashu. The Gemara says no. So if it's a nice and tam, we're saying if it's new wine on top of grapes, and it is absorbed into the grape, it's going to be also a nice and tam. So l'chayr that's shver and Abaya. Abaya said if they have the same taste, then it's considered min b'minoi, which is also b'mashu. Why is it nice and tam? Which again, we're basing it on two assumptions. So first the Gemara says no. I'm not agreeing to the second assumption that it's benois and tam. It's talking about where it's even a mashu of yain nesach fell in it. So Gemara says now the basis of why we thought it was talking about benois and tam. Hamadikani seif azah klal kol shaban nosik and nois and tam also b'chaim kol shem benois and tam mutter. For the fact that the end of the Mishnah says it depends on whether it's nois and tam lefgam or not nois and tam lefgam. Vice says we're talking about nois and tam. We're not talking about a mashu. Mechlal benois and tam askina. But Abaya will say. Abai says enechanami. It could be it's talking about a nice and tam, but it's still not a problem. Masiza b'chamra tika b'envi. We're talking about where Abai will argue on the first assumption that we're talking about new wine. We're talking about chamra tika, old wine. So the taste is different. So therefore, according to Abaya, it's not min b'she'ene. It's min b'she'ene, meaning, and that's why it has to be nice and tam. According to Rabbi, you could say it's talking about new wine, which I don't know why the Gemara assumed that, but the Gemara wanted to assume that. Well, I guess that's the stamius, and therefore it's new wine, but it doesn't make a difference whether it's new wine or old wine. It's a different shame, and that's the reason it's min b'shein minoi, and that's why it has to be nice and tam. Okay, we'll stop over here. Tomorrow we'll continue at 10 to 8.